Hey everyone, and welcome back to Not Your Forte Podcast. This is a little bit of a different kind of week, a little different scenario as it is with most people in the world right now. So a little bit of a cold opening. This week, Dr. Payne and I, we're going to chat a little bit on kind of how we're responding to it, both from a student's perspective and a professor's perspective, and then just kind of what all are kind of the tools and things you need to know when you're working to transition to online instruction, which definitely as music majors is going to be a very unique transition that will pose a few difficulties, but definitely something that I and Dr. Payne believe we're going to be able to successfully navigate as long as we continue to work together. But anyways, Dr. Payne, how are you?
I'm doing all right. And I think this whole experience with COVID-19 has been, number one, it's been surreal. Number two, it's unprecedented. And then the third component that I would say is where I think we will struggle the most in this process is that music is inherently social. Music is about interacting. And so now's going to be the time for us to figure out how do we maintain that social nature, but in an online format. And so throughout this podcast today, I'm going to share a couple things that I think might be helpful in making those transitions. But first and foremost is that online instruction and the way that this is going to work is going to be different. And it's going to, it's not only shaking your world as a music education major, but it's shaking your professor's world. Because in many cases, a lot of professors have not taught online before. They've never really thought about, well, how would I engage in music theory, or how would I engage in, maybe ensemble or music making online. What does that look like? How does that? Now, there are infinite amount of resources out there on people that have been doing this for a while. The reality is we're shifting from in-person classes to online classes midstream. And that in and of itself is going to create issues both for the students and for the teacher. So I think we have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, definitely. So let's take things back a little bit. This is kind of a really fast developing kind of situation. What were kind of your initial responses starting out with just how fast this kind of changed? What were you doing as this was developing?
As this was developing, one of the things that I really worked on was I knew probably late February that this was a very big reality. And so I started thinking in my brain, all right, how would I deliver the courses that I'm currently teaching? Number one, how would I deliver it online? And number two, then I would think through what are those essential objectives? What do my students need to know? And excellent. All right. Well, hopefully we can cut that portion of it out. So, because if she would have just said, "Hey, I need some paper," I could have grabbed the paper and went through with it.
I don't know. I kind of like the sneaking around.
Well, it was funny, and then I tried to point to the paper, and she was like, "What?" All right. So, all right. Let's we'll back up. What was the question?
We're just talking about kind of like your initial responses as this situation was developing.
Yeah, so I had an idea that this was going to happen, but one of the things I wanted to think about was what were those primary objectives? What did the students need to take out of this course? What content were they going to need? And then I had to really prioritize. For me, thinking through, okay, what is it that's essential that students take from this course, and understand that I'm going to have to sacrifice something, because students, we're not going to be able to have as intensive of study that we would in an in-person setting. and then switching midstream from in-person to online, there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be frustration, and knowing that in most cases we're not going to meet at the regular intervals that we would meet. You know, a 3-day class, we're not going to meet 3 days a week. We're probably going to meet once a week to answer any questions and use it as a virtual office hour, and the rest is going to be guided instruction online. And this will get into transitioning into online instruction. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would share with students, is that, you know, your teacher might decide to do that, what we call synchronous instruction, which means we're going to meet virtually at the same time that we would meet as if we were meeting in person. The problem that a lot of people are going to run into is most schools are not equipped to handle that kind of bandwidth. And so like a school that's got 20,000 students, well, let's say 15,000 of them have a class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9:30. If you've got 15,000 people jamming into let's say Zoom, like we're using right now,
Yep.
you have 15,000 people trying to jump on and use that software through the university, all at 9 a.m. You can guarantee there's going to be some technological breakdowns.
Yep.
And so a lot of this is trying to think about, all right, what can students do on their own? So my biggest piece of advice is, you know, number one, be patient, because we're trying to navigate this at the same time that you're trying to navigate it.
Yep.
And everybody has those same level of stressors. The other thing that I would say is set yourself up a daily schedule and follow that daily schedule. Find a place in your home that can almost act as
an office or
as an office. Absolutely. You know, so you can't really tell in here. You can tell a little bit over here. I've got my office basically set up in a downstairs bedroom. And so it has been cordoned off now as the office. And so I wake up every morning like I would. I get ready as I would, and I walk downstairs and I go right into my office.
Yeah, and definitely, I'm just going back to kind of the initial reactions and stuff. I remember, so spring break started over a week ago here at K-State, and as this kind of situation with the coronavirus and stuff was evolving, at first, like I was kind of aware of everything going on and like following the news along, but I'm like, oh, this is not gonna like escalate in the way in which it did. I remember just sitting in coffee shop downtown, and I was just like, I was kind of keeping track of it, but I'm like, okay, I'll keep looking at this and stuff for now, but I'm gonna keep working on everything, like getting ready for after spring break. I was working on a lot of plans for Phi Mu Alpha. We were going to have our province workshop actually this last weekend, so I was getting things organized for that, getting things organized for future fraternity events and stuff, and then like literally like within 3 days time of like it just keeps popping up more and more, then like all this like NCAA tournaments, like all these things canceled, which it was like, okay, this is definitely something that's serious. And then everything from K-State and other schools across the country responding to it by extending breaks, by announcing transitioning to online, by closing down campuses. It's like, oh, this is something that is really going to affect the day-to-day lives of a lot of people. Like in my instance, a big thing was since all group meetings are canceled, all of our fraternity events are canceled for the semester. We're unable to we're going to go out to nursing home to go out and sing, which we very much can't do that. And we're going to host a recital at the end of the semester, and now we're unable to do that. So it's been a lot of kind of like transitioning and working to make it, like you discussed, prioritizing what we really need to do and what we can do, And while it's definitely heartbreaking, especially for people who these are some people's last semesters on campus, or whether they're student teaching. I have a lot of friends who I've been in touch with that they're absolutely heartbroken. Like to think like our last performance, say with the ensemble you're in, being the one right before spring break when we're just ready to get to work on the next concert block, or senior recitals canceled, and just a variety of other things that are kind of taken away from a lot of people due to kind of this. So it's definitely a very hard and surreal kind of. I remember talking to someone that this kind of felt like a movie is what it felt like. This is like an opening to some like pandemic movie or whatever that you've seen, and it's just like, this is really happening right now, and that's insane to think about. But I think the huge thing to get out of this is that this is an opportunity for us to work together as a community, as a school, as a nation, and as a world, to combat this and try to grow closer through these kind of harder situations, and really learn how to adjust and work together.
Absolutely. And I think that last point is the strongest, um, is that we have to go through this together and understand that, this shift to online instruction is not going to be smooth. And you're probably, as a student, you're not going to necessarily, because most of our students, they want to be there in person. They chose not to take these classes online because they wanted to take those classes in person.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teacher, I understand that. I get that. But we also have to understand that we don't have that option anymore. And so, what you take out of a class is really going to be dependent upon how much you engage with the content that you are
Yep.
providing. And so there is only so much that the professor is going to be able to do. You also want to understand that most of your professors haven't done online instruction. And those that have, like, I could set up our courses for it to be all in the process of doing online instruction. But the problem is that a majority of my students have never taken online courses in music. And so what that looks like, what that feels like,
Mm-hmm.
is going to be, there's going to be a strong learning curve there as well. And that's going to be technologically, there's going to be issues at play.
Yep.
From a just completing instruction, being able to take content, being able to synthesize it, when you don't have that social aspect to be able to go back and forth, there's going to be some bumps in the road. And
Uh-huh.
so I think
And
learning and growing together is huge. The other point that I want to bring up that I think was really, really strong on your part were those seniors, those people that are student teaching next semester, that played their final concert right before spring break, thinking, well, we've got one more concert and now it's gone. For those student teachers that got the email last week that said, by the way, we're canceling commencement,
yeah.
those seniors are no longer getting to walk across the stage. And this really trickles down into the public schools. Think about those seniors whose state tournaments were canceled,
Mm-hmm.
and those seniors who are not going to get a chance to walk across the stage to get their diploma because we can't have gatherings larger than 50, or the senior banquets. Think about all of those lasts that you had your senior year of high school, and those,
Contest season, for band,
absolutely.
choir, and like prom is not happening anymore, and this is an impact across the nation.
Absolutely. And think about it. And since this is a music ed podcast, think about that from your choir, orchestra, band director perspective. In many cases, these directors have seen these kids grow up from beginners all the way through to this senior year in high school. And they've been there from the time they saw the joy in their eyes the first time that they either had a choir concert, or the first time they put their hands on an instrument. And now all of a sudden, those chances to go to solo and ensemble, to go to large group festival, to have those last spring concert moments, to have prom, to really take in those final high school moments. They're not getting a chance to do that. And, as much as it hurts those seniors, those directors are heartbroken too. I've seen so many Facebook posts
Yep.
of director friends that are just like, what do we do? Our year was ripped away just as much as everybody else's, and it's really hard for them to come to grips with. I have several friends that are retiring this year, and as music teachers, they were like, we thought we had 6 more weeks to work with our students and to say our goodbyes, and now we go to spring break thinking we'll get to see them one last time, and boom, it's gone.
Yeah. And just kind of before we dive in a little bit more of just how to adjust, a big thing that a lot of people need to make sure that they're doing is following kind of the guidelines that are coming out from the World Health Organization, the CDC, because while this is a really unfortunate situation that we're in, we do have a chance to, if this looks like an overreaction a few months down the line, then we treated this correctly.
Absolutely.
And
And I think you're exactly right. Stay healthy, create a routine for your day. As music majors, we are creatures of habit. So don't let it get into, well, I'm going to binge this show on Netflix, or, getting into another series on Hulu. Really make sure that you structure out your day. And for a parent of 2 kids, one in high school, one in elementary, I've got a freshman and a 5th grader. Structure for both of them is really important because their world is turned upside down too.
yeah,
So keeping in mind that while we might not think it's a big deal, if we go through this without structure, it's going to be very difficult. So think through, and we've got a list of things that we want to cover: exercising and cleaning and doing hangouts with friends. I think that's important for you to have a little bit of each of that. You can still do the activities you were doing on a day-to-day basis. Just make sure that you're doing them in an online format or some way that keeps the nice social distancing going. But every night before we go to bed, we sit down with our girls and we say, okay, what do you want to get done tomorrow? And we set up those goals and objectives. And then we write out a schedule that's going to help us do that. And we have a little bit of outside time where we can get out and we can go on a walk.
yeah.
I haven't changed my plan, even though I don't have anywhere to be. I'm still waking up at the same time. I still go out for my morning run. I come back, I get ready for the day, and then we've got the day scheduled out. And I've got time to set aside that I write, time to set aside to record videos and get everything set up for the courses. I've got time set aside to catch up on grading, because originally I was going to grade during spring break, but when the news came down that I was going to have to move 4 courses into online format, I had to put the grading to the back burner because there wasn't enough time to be able to convert 4 courses. And that's another thing, beyond scheduling, a little grace for professors through this process, because they might have been in the middle of grading a midterm, or they might have been in the middle of grading, a paper. Their world has now been hijacked and they're having to redo all these. So you will get your papers back, you will get all of that grading done, but everything is kind of pushed back a little.
It's an adjustment for everyone right now, teachers, students, just everyone trying to figure it out. And going back to what we were talking about routine and stuff and things in which you should try to do to make your day-to-day seem a little bit normal. I know as a music major, sometimes your normal day-to-day can be a lot when it came to when things were back, were like a couple weeks ago, were more normal and stuff like that. I've really taken this as an opportunity, one, to make sure I'm getting enough sleep right now, and kind of I just adjusted my routine a little bit to be like, okay, I don't need to wake up like at 5 a.m. or whatever to have to do everything. I can wake up just a little bit later. I can make sure I go to bed a little bit earlier, and then fill in my day with everything in which I normally need to do. Like I've made sure, especially these past couple days, to get out my planner in the morning, figure out what I'm going to do today, and figure out what I need to do today. And then I always section off some time. Like I want to make sure that I have time to exercise. I want to have time to practice. And even it's okay to take some time to even sit down and watch your favorite show or Netflix or whatever. Take an hour break during the middle of the day, and that's okay to do. Um, so it's just really kind of figuring out what do you need. We talk about this all the time on the podcast. It's about kind of knowing yourself, knowing exactly what you need, because you know yourself best. If it's going to help you best to continue to wake up at 5 a.m. And go through the day like that, then do that. If it's going to do you best to, sleep in a little bit, wake up at 8 or 9, and just move your day around a little bit. It's whatever you feel like is going to keep you both productive, but also healthy, physically and mentally.
And then communicate with both your colleagues and your professors, because that's going to be the biggest issue, is trying to see how everybody's going to schedule out working through their courses.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they're going to have meetings on a regular basis, or is it going to be a one time a week deal. I can tell you some of the guidelines that are being sent out, that they're trying to make as many courses asynchronous as possible, which limits the amount of activity on the university's side, because they don't want to overload the system
Mm-hmm.
or the network too much, because they're not used to having everybody online from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. There are bits and pieces where people are working different things. The other side of it is that if students are using data on their phones, many of them are going to be accessing this data through their phones. And if that's the case, now all of a sudden that begins to run up big bills if they're not on an unlimited data plan. And so that's a major issue and a consideration for us. And then what is access like, outside of metropolitan areas? Fiber optic cable is not available statewide.
Mm-hmm. And I know another big thing too is because at least for K-State, this transition happened well over spring break. There's a lot of people who, like, for their tech classes don't, or for just classes in general, don't have access to their textbooks or instruments that they may need for these courses.
Right. Which makes, there's so many variables in here that, again, I'm just going to come back to being patient. And so I think really talking about this transition, become familiar with the tools of your university. Yep. And so at K-State, a lot of people use Zoom because we have the professional version built in. And so we can actually use that. Zoom is a fantastic resource. There are a lot of different ways to use it. My thing would be, check it out, look at it, make sure you understand that whenever you sign on the first time, that it always doesn't default to have your video on. So looking to make sure that the video is turned on, how to connect your sound. You're able to share your screen. How do you share the screen? How do you optimize it for sharing? How do you optimize it for sound?
Yep.
What are the chat features? Go on and try some of these things before your professors are requiring you to do it. Because as a in-person student transitioning into an online student, it's a completely different
you're going to need to be a lot more proactive as a student, and like Dr. Payne is saying here, check out whatever, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Google Hangouts, whether it's whatever that might be used. go online, check out tutorials. That's what I did for Zoom, because I'm like, well, I don't really know how this works. I haven't really used it, so I watched their YouTube tutorials on how to work everything, and I still feel like I don't know everything, but I feel a little bit better prepared for when I do.
And I think that's the word that you used, proactive. In an online format, the learning is within the student themselves. The professor tries to put the content out there and sequence it in a way that as you go through and you do a discussion board. I realize that sometimes people don't take a whole lot out of discussion boards, but the purpose of discussion boards is to get you to think about the content, reflect on the content, and then have conversations with your colleagues about that.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the requirement might be respond to the prompt and then reply to at least two others, that's just trying to get the conversation started. So I would suggest, at that point, go a little bit above and beyond. Open up a conversation, try and get people going back and forth, trying to develop a conversation around that content, because that's where the learning happens. Think about it in the terms of your classroom. Whenever your student says, or whenever your professor says, turn to your neighbor and discuss this, that part is getting the conversation going so that the larger conversation can have more learning impact. And so you've got to make sure that you see what the function of each one of those assignments are, because what would normally be just kind of a normal learning sequence in an in-person class is now having to be contrived in some way in an online format. So why did they ask a discussion question here? Why did they put this assignment here? And so, like for me, the way that I'm designing the courses is that I'll have a content page that will kind of map out what each day is going to look like during the week, just so that everything kind of gets covered. And then on Sunday night at midnight, then there's an assignment due, whether that be a discussion board or a small little reflection project. But it's not going to be anywhere near the level of what we would do in an in-person class when I'm meeting you about 3 times as often. So I want to make sure that we scale that back a little bit, but that you get the main meat of what I need you to learn throughout the course. And so everything is due on the same night at the same time, and that there aren't varied due dates, because that's where it's going to get tricky. When you're not seeing a professor at the same amount of time, then there's less time for reminders. So the biggest thing that I would say is, once the courses are set in the new online format, write your due dates down in a calendar and get reminders set up for you. If you're a person that needs to be reminded every other day, set reminders on your laptop, your phone, everything, so that you remember when those due dates are, because you're not going to have the luxury of having your professor there reminding you on a regular basis, because they're seeing you on a regular basis. They might see you once a week to just catch up and answer questions about the week's progress, and that's it. And because there's just not going to, because everything is just so different. So,
and we've talked about how music especially is such a social kind of environment in terms of music education and just being in a music building. I really think that just because this is transitioning, your social distancing and stuff, you don't have to lose that community aspect. We have a lot of great technology still at our hands to where we can have group discussions, group chats and stuff like that, to where we can keep each other accountable as fellow students and future colleagues, because that's a big thing in which I've already been working on, whether it's with Phi Mu Alpha, whether it's been with some of the other like classes I'm in. We've been communicating with each other already about like just making sure of adjusting to this, making sure everyone has things in which they need. I know a lot of people had messaged me and a couple other people who were still in Manhattan to ask if we could go and get stuff out of McCain for them, because they'll be locking down campus soon. And so it's still count on having that community aspect. It shifts a little bit, kind of the way it's going to look. You're not going to be face to face every day, but it's still a wonderful opportunity to try and grow closer together as friends, as peers, and really power through this together. Because especially with like some of the education courses we're in right now, like 511, like 513, those are very heavy community based kind of classrooms. And I think that we can work to still maintain that if we're able to once again be proactive as students, and be understanding that this is going to be a very different, unusual time, but we'll get through this.
Absolutely. The other thing that I want to do is, for those of you watching the video podcast, actually sharing my screen. For those of you in the audio, you won't be able to see this, but I'll tell you, check out bandlab.com. And this isn't a plug for them. This is just, we were talking about community music making. I think this is important to bring this out. What you can actually do is you can create group compositions. You can log in through Facebook or Google. It's free. It works very similar. It's like a hybrid of GarageBand and, I'm going to say, GarageBand and Facebook. So everybody, you can go in, you can start a composition, and then you can share it with your friends, and your friends can add to it, and you can begin to make different compositions just through bandlab.com. So that would be one way to get involved. The other one that I would say is acapella.
Yeah, I just actually downloaded acapella the other day, and this is a big thing that Dr. Payne and I want to talk about. Is just because you're kind of stuck at home or other places and stuff, that doesn't mean you have to stop sharing music, because that's what really binds us together, is this shared love of music.
Absolutely. And because this is a music education podcast, I'm going to put a music ed spin on that. When you go in, let's say you download the acapella app, okay? Here's my challenge to each one of you. And that is to go in and say, okay, I want to learn this tune today. And you pick a tune. You can pick a Billboard top 100 tune. And what I would do is think about what music are your students listening to today. So if you've got a 7th grader, what are they listening to on a regular basis? Okay, go down, transcribe that tune, then flesh it out and create a 4-part arrangement. And then when you're doing that, guess what? All of a sudden that becomes a warm-up for your beginning band. That becomes a warm-up for your choir. Now you can teach that to them line by line, and then you put that all together, and now you've got teaching materials, and you're doing it so that you can keep playing, and that but now you're integrating technology, or you're finding out new technologies, how they work. You're working on your ear training, you're working on your theory, you're working on all of these skills, you're synthesizing it together, and you're creating teaching materials for when you're in the classroom.
And not to mention,
that's going to be a huge thing to do as well. And that's part of being proactive.
And not to mention just the community aspect of it, even people outside of music. I yesterday, I said, if I can't go to the orchestra, I was going to bring the orchestra to me. I pulled up Jupiter from on Spotify from the Planet Suite, and I pulled the part up on IMSLP, and I played along with it, and I shared it on Facebook and stuff, and like there's a lot of ways in which you can continue playing. My personal favorite way to keep my chops in shape during extended breaks is I pull up a symphony or something that I can find a part online pretty easily and just play along with it, because it's a super fun opportunity. And then going further, what we talked about with your working your ear training and stuff like that. I mean, I've had a huge inspiration in terms of I have found a new love for jazz through the experience of I'm a horn player, so not typically your normal jazz instrument, but I also I have a trumpet rented out, and so I went ahead. I went ahead and bought a real book.
Nice.
And I'm just having fun playing along with recordings and stuff, and just kind of experimenting with a different instrument. honestly, this extended break might be a little dangerous for my wallet in terms of I keep looking at all this music and other things. I'm like, oh, I have plenty of time to like look at that, work on that and stuff like that. And it's pretty interesting and stuff, but just keep playing music. I really want to challenge all of you listeners to just share online. I know a lot of us can be afraid to share things online, especially as musicians. We're sometimes perfectionists, but it's okay if it's not perfect sometimes. And just share with your family, share with your friends. It's like, just because I'm stuck at home, just because I'm having to self-isolate, social distance, whatever that might be, I still have my horn. I'm still able to do what I enjoy, and that is playing and sharing music. And it's really, really fun to just kind of have that opportunity. I joked around the other day. I'm like, oh, extended break just means I have extra time to just practice and play my horn. And beyond sharing yourself, just share some of your favorite pieces that you like to listen to. I think the other day, the Dallas Winds posted on their YouTube page a wonderful version of Nessun Dorma.
Mm-hmm.
And just I made sure I just shared it on Facebook, because it's beautiful music. And it's sometimes music can both be a way to kind of like distract, but to also just realize that there's some beauty that can come out of things.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would say is this transition is going to impact the different classifications differently. It's going to impact
Yeah.
freshmen different than sophomores, than juniors, than seniors. And so the biggest thing that I would say is with freshmen, take from this what you can. Understand that you've got 3 more years, that a lot of the professors will remake a lot of the courses in the next couple of years to be able to catch up what you maybe don't get to at this time. Looking at our freshman music ed course, there are going to be aspects that we just can't get to in an online format. So we're going to integrate that into experiences in other courses throughout the remainder of their time here on campus. Okay. So understand that some of your classes might be limited, but take from that what you can. Get as much out of the content that you're provided and apply that to future experiences. For our older students, juniors and seniors, we don't have the luxury of time. For some, you're student teaching next fall. Others, you're student teaching next spring. And so some of those experiences were going to be critical to your success. For you, I would say get as much out of the content and be proactive and try and think of ways that you can design lessons based on that content. How would you apply that in the classroom? If you were the teacher, how would you take that into the next steps? What are those next steps in the sequence that you want your students to learn something more about music? And I encourage you to take those next steps, even though it's not required for the class. Set aside 30 minutes each day to just go through and say, okay, what are these next steps? What are some things that I could do that will make me a better teacher, will help me develop new materials, and just be creative? Because that's the part that we're going to sometimes miss out on online instruction, is that we just don't have the amount of collaboration that allows those ideas to emerge. So getting together, planning with your colleagues, 3 or 4 getting together on a Zoom or a Google Hangout and just say, hey, I had these ideas. What other ways could we teach this concept? Be proactive through this process, because we want you to get as much out of this as you can. But online instruction can only push you so far. The rest of it, really, it gives you the tools to be successful. You have to use those tools and take that to the next step. So be thinking 2 and 3 semesters ahead if you're a junior or a senior, and make the most out of the content that you're getting over these next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Really well put, Dr. Payne. Just any kind of final thoughts or kind of comments and stuff that you willing to share?
Maintain a schedule, go the extra mile, get as much out of these 6 weeks as you can, And above all, stay safe, stay smart, and make sure that you're just taking care of yourself. And that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yep. And just thank you so much for we're still going to be able to work and continue with the podcast. We delayed our kind of episode. We're coming out a little bit late. The next episode will be about we'll be interviewing a few student teachers and stuff, asking a few questions of them. I very much look forward to sharing their experience, both before everything kind of happened, and also just discussing how this is affecting them too. We have some really great student teachers from K-State, and they're offering some amazing insight onto their experience.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of this podcast. And like Eric said, we're going to be back with new topics. We're going to be talking to student teachers, but we'll also come back in a couple weeks and talk about what have the experience has been so far, and maybe bring on a couple students to ask them what their experiences are.
Yeah.
And really kind of have a roundtable discussion of, we're looking at this on the front side. Let's look at it through the middle and see what's going on. And let's hear the voices of students on the ground right now and what their experiences have been and how to cope. Because honestly, we just don't know. It's unprecedented. So we'll continue.
One thing that I'm doing that I recommend is I've been doing I've been doing video journaling kind of throughout this experience and stuff. So this is something I just upload it to YouTube as a private video. It's something I can look back on, be like, okay, so we were able to get through this. We were able to adjust and come out of this stronger than ever.
Absolutely.
And just final note, just keep sharing the music, please. Keep sharing.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, take care, and hopefully we'll see you and talk with everyone soon.